All right, guys, welcome to Submission Radio, morning after live UFC 325. I'm Denis Shkaradov. I'm so excited for this episode. By the way, I'm coming live from the hotel. I literally have to run out straight after this. I excuse the setup. I have some weird webcam. I have this mic. I have stories from this week. And I have a couple of guests I want to introduce to you, a couple of friends that there's so much to talk about. Before I get to them, just a quick reminder. Jump in the chat, throw a super chat down. Those go to the front of the queue. Throw your questions in as we go so I can earmark them and we don't miss them. I got to get to the airport after this, so make sure you get in quick because we're not going to be going for a very long time today. Oh, man, I'm feeling alive right now. I've got a little coffee in hand. It's been a big week here. Let me introduce the first guest. My first guest right here. Man, it wasn't the same this week without him. He's obviously always down here with us, having a few beers and a few laughs, sharing in the stories and everything else in between. Oh, he also does some coverage too. Jose Youngs, what was it like to not be here with the boys?
It was a little weird. I think this is my first fight week I've missed entirely in more than a couple of years, but it was a nice change of pace to cover event from the couch. My first Paramount event because the last one I was obviously at, so mixed bag, I guess. I didn't get the full inauguration of the Paramount era, but good enough, I guess. Doesn't really feel much different, but missed you guys. Felt weird seeing your guys work down there, not being there.
Dude, you missed a big moment. We'll get to it in a second, but my next guest right here is at the mechanic. He's been all over the world, joining us from his backyard to all sorts of interesting rooms, and now he's at the mechanic. New York Rick, what have you done to the car now?
No damage or anything, just getting an inspection. But yes, I'm a man about town, and you never know where you're gonna find me.
Well, I'll tell you, man, I'm happy to have you here. And if they need any advice on the car or anything like that, have them hop on as well. We'll ask the internet. I'm sure we'll get some great advice as we go.
I thought we were gonna ask you. Aren't you going to provide the expertise?
I can provide them, but it'll just make everything worse. But we can do it anyway. Hey, speaking of making things memorable, I got to talk to you guys about last night. What a crazy, crazy moment for one Alex Volkanovski, who was able to go out UFC 325 and put on a performance against Diego Lopes. Now, Jose and Eric, you guys have been in the big arenas. You guys have heard the big reactions. But for those people at home, there's a little taste of what it was like sitting cage side when Alex Volkanovski was coming out. Crazy stuff, man, right? Like, we've seen a lot of people have big moments. Conor McGregor obviously has had some big ones. But I'll go to you first, Derrick. What did it feel like for you on the TV? Did it translate how much the fans appreciate Alex Volkanovski being back in Sydney? It felt like a whole production from start to finish, from the time he walked out to the time he walked in the back. Man, the fans couldn't get enough of it. It was almost as good as Perth against Islam. Of course, here he won. So even better in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it definitely felt big, especially when you contrast it to earlier in the day. We were watching the Royal Rumble in Saudi Arabia, where you could have heard a pin drop when everybody was coming out. So to compare and contrast the type of reaction that Volkanovski was getting, it definitely came across on TV. And yeah, as expected, right? Like they've created a market where Robert Whittaker, Israel Adesanya, Alexander Volkanovski have kind of become the staples of the region. And it's no surprise to me that he had such a warm welcome.
I'll tell you the performance as well, man. Diego Lopes came to play. Of course, we've got a super chat here. How crazy that Lopes broke both of his feet in the fight. I mean, insane stuff. He had to be helped into the back. It was wild. Jose, what did you make of the way that this rematch played out? From the cage side, when you were watching it, man, he was throwing heat at Alex Volkanovski through the whole night. I don't know if it translated on TV, but it was so impressive to see Alex do what he did to this version of Diego Lopes.
To me, it felt like rounds 6 through 10. It just felt like a continuation of the same fight. Diego made the adjustments he could, but Volk seemed to have a plan for plans A, B, C, and D, and Diego just couldn't adapt to Volk adapting. And that, I think stuff like that is what separates champions from just highly touted contenders, is adaptability and being just, you know, being able to adjust on the fly. Obviously breaking your feet, both feet, I think that was pretty evident. Someone, I can't remember who, but someone on our Slack channel was like, it just felt like Diego was stuck in the mud for a bit. Now we know why. Yeah, but to me, it just felt like continuation in the first round. Like it's like Volk just never let off the gas from the end of their first fight in Miami.
New York Rick, obviously he tried to circle the other way. He tried to cage cut. We saw he was great at, the takedown defense through different parts of the fight. Eventually Volk got him into a weird kind of 69 position. He was cheering towards the end of it. But do you think, were you surprised? Were you shocked? Was there anything that you didn't expect from Diego Lopes here? Was there something that you thought he needed to do that he wasn't able to do, obviously, in Sydney yesterday?
I wasn't surprised because I did think that there were two options for Diego Lopes, right? Option one was to get more aggressive than he was in the first fight, which he was pretty damn aggressive. It would require just basically selling out altogether and chasing a finish desperately and potentially getting himself in danger and getting finished himself. Or alternatively, like a little bit of a more measured approach, which is what we saw. Now, I don't know if that was due to the fact that he was having problems with his feet, right? Or it was just part of the game plan. But he was seemingly, at least for the first two rounds, just kind of like waiting on counters in a way that he didn't in the first fight. He was so aggressive in the first fight, it created all those, wild exchanges and scrambles and opportunities to create chaos. Now, Volk did well in those, but Diego also did well in those in the first fight, and I thought he looked better in that fight. So I wasn't surprised because I was expecting one of those two outcomes. I think the better version of it would have been if he just went more relentlessly for the finish. Akin to, now, don't mistake me saying this in comparing the skill level or saying that this would be as effective, but in the way that Justin Gaethje did against Paddy Pimblett, right? It was head down, I'm going to march forward and I'm going to try to knock you out. If you get me, you get me, but this is what I'm going to do. And now I'm not comparing Paddy Pimblett to Alexander Volkanovski, but I'm contrasting the styles, right? We saw a much more measured approach from Diego Lopes, and I think he would have been better served with an even more aggressive approach than he had in the first fight, which was very, very aggressive.
What do you think, Jose? Well, for Diego Lopes after this, now it's 2 losses to Alex Volkanovski. No doubt about it, this guy can be a future champion, but it's sort of what we spoke about, right? It's a great opportunity. But you lose to Alex Volkanovski twice so soon and he retires, let's say, in a year or so and you become champion. People are always going to be like, well, here's the champ. But, Alex beat him twice like that. It probably doesn't help the legacy in the long run when it comes to his future as potentially being the champion.
No, but at the same time, Max fought Volkanovski 3 times and Volk beat his ass once. Second one was a dud. First one was I think a back and forth fight. Both of these fights were, I think, very entertaining. There's a lot of featherweight fights to be made right now, and I think Diego's going to have a better answer of his path to the title after in the coming months, because he's got heat with a very specific fighter that I don't think they're going to fight anytime soon. And obviously, the three of us, I'm sure, have heard of this Movsar Lerone fight potentially going down in London. If one of those loses, I don't know why you don't just give him Diego, because I think that'd just be a fun fight all around. For both. Like, there's history with Movsar, and then Lerone, I think, is obviously losing to an undefeated guy like Movsar. It's nothing to hang your hat at, and you can just get right back in there if you beat Diego, who just fought for the belt twice.
Yeah, it's funny. At the press conference, right, Alex Volkanovski said he wants to stop the line cutting in his division.
Yeah.
He doesn't want anyone jump over. But we saw John Silva, right? He's a pretty popular guy. This is an MMA fighting graphic. Look at this.
Sick
Talking
graphic.
about it, he's going to get very nice graphic, trade with Ilya Topuria, and Alex Volkanovski just put it down as him being butthurt because of what happened to Ruffy. But New York Rick, I got to ask you, do you think John Silva is in with a chance here to potentially fight Alex Volkanovski next, especially with the fact that, Alex wants to stay active, and what if Movsar and Murphy, one of them gets injured? Movsar has had issues in the past. Could John Silva just be the next man up in the meantime?
Yeah, you absolutely could. Just based on the reasoning that landed Diego Lopes in the fight, right? Nobody was clamoring for this rematch. Volk beat him pretty handily. It was a good fight, but it wasn't in dispute. And so he got this opportunity because he's game, willing to step in when an opportunity presents itself, and an exciting fighter. And John Silva is exactly the same way. So of that mold, it definitely would make sense that he would be in the running. Do I think that Volk will campaign for that, right? Do I think Volk will help him in any way? Probably not. I think Volk is as we've kind of talked about already, somebody who cares about the order of things, cares about number one contenders, wants Movsar or Lerone to get their opportunity because that's the right thing that would happen in this division. So I think John Silva will have to get some help. It won't be coming from Volk, right? It would have to be a case where, as you said, somebody gets hurt, there's an opportunity, he jumps in, something to that effect. Otherwise, I think he's probably behind those other two guys. But with the UFC in 2026 and beyond, it is just about timing. So next man up, if those guys are fighting in London and all of a sudden they have an opportunity to do a fight with Volk, I have a feeling that John Silva would be the next name called after those two.
I would love to be in the mechanic right now, just watching you do the show from the couch, and people are just like, I'll have some new ties. You're just sitting, look at this. Look, there's people looking at you. I love it. That counts as views for me. So next time I'm doing advertising, I'm putting that into my analytics. Jose, what about this super chat? $4.99 thank you so much. Does Arman jump the line and drop down to 45 and fight Volkanovski? It was a big narrative this week because there was nothing to talk about, and it did feel like a very, very dead fight week when it came to traffic and views and interest. But in all reality, Arman, Tsarukyan, Jose dropping down, I mean, that can't really happen. I mean, I'd love to see it. I think Volkanovski would love the challenge, but there's no way they're going to give him that. They don't want him to give him a lightweight shot.
No, I mean, Arman is like, I saw a graphic where it was like tier list of fighters that Dana White hates, and then there was a whole separate category for Arman Tsarukyan, and that's pretty accurate. There's no way. I think also at the time when he was saying all this, Arman didn't really have a path or like a potential opponent. But after the Benoit win and the call out, I think a lot of people were like, all right, if Gaethje is truly going to fight Ilya and we need Arman to fight, sign me up for BSD and Arman. That's just a fun scrap right there. So I don't unless Arman can do it, prove he can do it, then do it. Because I don't need another guy like trying to drop down like TJ Dillashaw, just sucking himself dry and then getting blown out of the water.
Yeah, I don't know how much there would be to answer as well, right, Rick?
Yeah.
If Arman came down, that's the main thing. For example, Dan Hooker was like, yeah, like Arman loses, people would just be like, it's not his weight class, right? And if Arman wins, there's not much for Volk to gain in that fight either, because obviously he's putting up his belt against someone who's got everything to win here. It's just like a fight that wouldn't probably make that much sense.
It also doesn't make sense for Arman. I know, look, don't get me wrong. I love that Arman said it on our show. He said it to Ariel Helwani, but it just doesn't make sense for Arman. Like, beating Volk has, unfortunately already been done, right? We saw Islam and we saw Ilya do it back to back, and Arman is in conversation to fight the likes of those guys. I don't know if a win over Volk does what he needs it to do, right? Like, it gets him a UFC championship, but does he want to stay in that division? Are there other guys that he's really that interested in competing against? To me, the biggest fights are at lightweight. And so it really wouldn't make much sense when I think Arman Tsarukyan is the best lightweight in the world. I favor him against Ilia Topuria. Stay there, stay the course. Hope that Dana White finally gives you your opportunity. As we've seen before, he gives it. It'll just take some time, and I think Arman's been doing the good work on social media and offline to at least make sure that he's in good position. So hold steady, stay at lightweight, and just wait for your opportunity.
All right, so for those in the room that had Jose Aldo as their goat for featherweight, obviously now Volk ties Aldo for his UFC title defenses. There's a whole, conversation that could be made about, well, WEC, did those really count as the title defenses? Because it was basically the WEC belt that got converted into this belt. But to me, Alex Volkanovski is definitely, the greatest featherweight of all time. But Rick, I remember you were backing Aldo here. This win, obviously, maybe not the most impressive, but what does this do to your thoughts on who the greatest in the featherweight division is?
The longer he continues to operate at this level, the longer he continues to be this good as he advances, in age, the harder it becomes, right? I was steady on Jose Aldo for a while, but now he's had 2 wins since then, since I had that conversation. I maintain that the GOAT conversation to me is still a conversation. The he's the best featherweight I've ever seen conversation is over. I truly believe that Alexander Volkanovski is the best featherweight I've ever seen compete at his peak, at his best, and he seems to be pretty much near that still at this point in his career. I've not seen anybody better, but the GOAT, the resume kind of conversation, I think it really is still up for debate. But the debate is getting harder and harder to have. Two,
Yeah.
3, 4 more wins,
Yeah.
it just becomes silly to even continue to have it.
Silly. Us talking about retirement. He just signed a new deal. Apparently, this one even more lucrative than the one he was on. And for people that don't realize that the one he was on was super lucrative because it was the one that he took last minute for fighting Islam Makhachev. The price he paid for going on that losing streak after copying that head kick. So, Jose, how crazy is this? Instead of a retirement, we're talking about this guy potentially having another 3 or 4 fights. And after last night, you could see him, beating Movsar. You could see him beating Mavis. You could see him beating John Silva and cashing in at least 3 more checks before he pieces out. It's wild, man. At 37.
Yeah, and I never thought he was going to retire because Volk doesn't seem like Volk doesn't want to leave food on the table. Like, he wants to prove himself against the Movsars and the Larones and everything. If he had beaten Movsar and then beaten Larone, all right, yeah, then he could ride off into the sunset, but there's still work to be done. And yeah, I was never in the camp that Volkanovski was going to retire. Even when I was in Abu Dhabi, there were like Australians there, and they're like, "Oh, Volk's going to retire in Sydney." I'm like, "No, he's not. Volk would never do that. He's not going to leave food on the table like that." So yeah, I'm glad he's sticking around. I'm glad we get to see the best at what they do continue to do what they do and give other people opportunities.
Rick, who do you think is the toughest fight for Volk right now? Is it Movsar? Is it Murphy? Is it Silva? I feel like it's Murphy because he's tough to fight. But who do you think, Rick?
I think it's Movsar. I think Movsar is the toughest fight for everybody in that division. He's so good at the one thing that he does. He's the best in the world at the one thing he does. And I think as well-rounded as Volk is, Volk has an advantage in the striking, the grappling, the footwork, every kind of department over most of the guys he's going to face. It's very rare that somebody would have something like Diego Lopes maybe had the power, but as we saw, Volk was taking his shots no problem in both fights. Movsar has an advantage over Volkanovski, and it's going to be interesting to see if he can exploit that. It's going to be interesting to see if he's able to get him into the positions that he needs to win that fight. Movsar's not Habib, though. Movsar's not Islam. He's not Hamzat. He's a level below that in terms of it. And we've seen him in tougher fights. Like we saw Aljamain Sterling go toe-to-toe with him in grappling. So I'm going to be interested to see what Alexander Volkanovski does when faced with somebody who's singularly focused in their attack as Movsar is. But I do believe he's the toughest test. I don't know that Larone does anything that worries me in a way that past opponents of Volkanovski have.
By the way, Aljamain Sterling, there's a guy that I wouldn't mind going into the Alex Volkanovski lottery as well, a fight between two legends. I feel good about that fight. You know who didn't feel good about this Diego Lopes rematch, though? The fans, the traffic, the people, even in Sydney during fight week when more tickets had to be released. And even though there were $1,000 or $2,000 each, it just was crazy to go from the Paddy Pimblett, Justin Gaethje card into this card and seeing the difference in traffic and interest that people had. Even down here in Sydney, even though Alex is a national treasure in Australia, it felt like people weren't really talking about it. The UFC saw something, Jose and Diego Lopes, for their future. They threw him back into that rematch. They said he has a huge market behind it. But I personally, a lot of the other guys in the media room did not feel that going into this card. Obviously, back-to-back cards as well, never easy. But man, I was just surprised at how little interest this thing got. It felt like the closer we got to the fight, people still did not give a shit what was going to happen. I mean, people are excited the day after now that we're moving forward. But Jose, do you think the UFC made a bit of a mistake making this the main event here? It just feels like, I don't know how many people watching on Paramount Plus, but this isn't the 7.8 whatever million global that they got last weekend.
I didn't like the main event because first fight was great, but like we just saw, Volk didn't have a fight in between there. And what made the Max Holloway rematch is so interesting, where Max, the first time Volk beat Max, it was close. And then they obviously gave Max the immediate rematch because of what he had done in the division. And then the third rematch was interesting because Max, put his head down and went back to work and beat a couple contenders and looked like Max was the best featherweight in the world. And that when Volkanovski fought Max Holloway, that was also the co-main event. So they weren't the top of the marquee that had to sell the pay-per-view, but that just looks like the two best featherweights in the world fighting each other. This is not that. It wasn't that. It wasn't to determine the quote GOAT or next generation, whatever. It was Diego lost handily the first time. John Silva fought like an idiot in that fight between, and Diego took advantage of it. And then Volk didn't have a fight since then, so he just did back-to-back Diego fights. Doesn't have to sell pay-per-views though, which obviously helps. It just, I don't know. It's hard to say if they made a mistake because is Movsar gonna generate more interest? Is Lerone Murphy going to generate more interest? Probably not. At least Diego, we know, is going to be in a banger of a fight. Competitively, Movsar and Lerone interested me more because they were fresh matchups and they did the work. Movsar, I've been at media days where Movsar has heard a question, be like, I don't understand that question. Move on. And then he just doesn't answer it. Like this. So there's no, like, of the three, Diego is going to be the best fight. None of them were going to sell anything. Like the only featherweight that'll probably generate interest like that is John Silva because he is a psychopath both in and out of the octagon. But I think we all agree he's not in a meritocracy world, not next in line. So I don't know. It's hard to say if I don't like the matchup, but I understand it.
I disagree, man. I think even Moussa or Murphy, I feel like people just felt annoyed. Like it was almost like a point to prove. They didn't want to watch it because they didn't like that the UFC rebooked it. I mean, Rick, you're one of the great producers in the space. Did you feel like the UFC made a mistake by just shoving this down people's throats? And do you think they learn from this main event going forward? I know they're just throwing guys around regardless of the rankings, but do you think because of the metrics, which at the end of the day tells them what they need to be doing, they might be a little bit more cautious when just throwing guys into rematches like this?
No, unfortunately, Dennis, I'm agreeing with Jose on this one. I just don't think either of those other options was going to drive any different numbers. I don't think this was like a revolt against the matchup. I just feel like Volkanovski is not a top guy where it's guaranteed numbers in that way. His personality has come a long way. I think he's a huge fan favorite, but he's not the guy who everybody's tuning in to see, oh my God, what's going to happen? Most of the time when Volkanovski wins, you actually know what's going to happen. Is he's kind of just going to put a masterclass on. He's going to dissect the dude. He's going to make adjustments in the middle of the fight. And by round 4, the fight's over because he's just so damn good. But he's not going to take somebody's head off, and he's not going to come in and rip their arm off. And so I think it's more of a Volkanovski problem, honestly, than it is a challenger problem. He's amazing. He's top of the food chain. He's incredible. He's in the GOAT conversation, but he's not a must-watch guy. He's not Alex Pereira. He's not Ilia Topuria. He's not even like Max Holloway and Charles Oliveira, who are fighting for the BMF belt. So I think they just have to understand, and I think they do understand that. And I think the pressure of not having to put on pay-per-views is actually going to benefit them greatly in terms of how they think about the roster and how they construct these cards. Because I think in a past era, they might have been hesitant to be like, oh, we're going to do Volkanovski as the headliner and do this. Now, obviously, it being in Australia changes that factor, right? Because they know they're going to sell a massive gate. But without having to worry about the pay-per-views, it's a blessing and a curse. The blessing is they don't have to be so stuck in their ways in terms of, hey, we need this type of person to headline a numbered card. The curse is now we might be getting cards with main events that we don't necessarily think are main event worthy. But at the end of the day, it all comes out in the wash. As long as we get the number of fights we need out of each top star, it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
I'll tell you, there were some other fights on this card, though, that are a little bit tough to watch. We'll talk about some of them in a second. But a man who had a really, really rough week was Ruffy, right? Another great graphic here from MMA Fighting, where he talks about how a few days ago his brother passed away, so he was very emotional. But then Alex Volkanovski reveals that he had really bad influenza, Ruffy did, and his back pain was terrible on the day of the fight. He could barely move. he goes out there and he was able to beat Fiziev and stop him the way that he did. And this is another guy that the UFC's like, fuck the ranking. We're just going to throw him in here. We just want to see what happens. Jose,
wait, before you do that, before you throw to Jose, are we going back to influenza? Do we not call it flu anymore? I just want to be clear, like, because I saw that, I heard that, like, do we not just call it flu? Are we going a legal name? Are we going government name?
Influenza sounds worse. It's all about selling fights.
Is it? I don't know. What's the deal? Are there different types of things, or is it the same? Rick, break it down for us. You're
no, I'm no doctor. Don't come to me for medical advice.
Yeah.
But I just call it old-fashioned flu. But yeah, sorry. Throw to Jose, and I just wanted to clarify that.
You were impressed, though, Rick, of what you saw from Ruffy being able to do that with whatever that he had.
Yeah, I mean, forget the flu part. Like,
Yeah,
you know, there's plenty of fighters show up with the flu. To lose your brother, he said he took his own life.
Mm-hmm.
That is a next level, and to have that type of performance, like, couldn't have been more impressed by Ruffy. He was my star of the night.
Jose, it's an interesting one for Ruffy next, though, right? I mean, the way that he put away Fiziev came out, he was in shape, he was ready to go. That performance from Fiziev, he was able to land early, and you could tell Ruffy took his time to get the distancing. But knowing what we know about Ruffy, barely being able to walk, influenza, the stuff in his personal life, the stuff with the camp stuff, that all seems really weird as well. How impressed are you with what he was able to do? And who do you think could be next for Ruffy next, bro?
Yeah, I think what Rick said nailed it. Like, the flu is one thing. Having your brother, take his life and then still fighting is just like, I couldn't get out of bed if that happened. Let it go and compete on the other side of the world against a guy that's also trying to punch a hole through my face. So Ruffy is just wired differently and is just operating at another level, I guess. In terms of who we could fight next, man, I don't know. Lightweight's always been weird to match make because it seems like a lot of guys at the top want those bigger names. Like, we've been talking about this for the last several years. Like, the quote unquote old guard seems to be on the, obviously, towards the end of their career. Poirier's already retired. Gaethje's saying, if I get knocked out again, I'm going to hang it up. Charles and Max are, probably past the halfway point of their career. Arman seems like the only young guy in that top five. No, well, I guess Paddy too, but I don't know whether Paddy belongs in the top five skill-wise is another conversation. I already said I like the Benoit Arman fight. We already saw Benoit Ruffy, so that doesn't make any sense. But like, Benoit Torres would be fun. Like, Farazian would be fun, but are those like big, like Ruffy, I feels like is a big name now based on that performance. A lot of people had his knockout over King Green as the knockout of the year. He seems to be more popular than his ranking shows, so he deserves a big name. But who do you give him? Because a lot of the big names probably wouldn't take that fight, and then the other popular names like Dan Hooker should probably fight Paddy Pimblett. Moicano needs a fight, Ruffy, but it seems like Ruffy is not the smallest guy. Probably needs a lot of time making weight, like Manuel Torres. It's not like you could get these quick turnaround fights. So I truly don't know. Called out Chandler, doubt that happens. Called out Conor McGregor, certainly not going to happen. Does Gamrot have a fight? You can make that fight. You can make the Benil.
You want him to die? You want Ruffy to die? What is wrong with you, sir?
Gamrot? Yeah, sure.
Why would they throw him in there against Fiziev? Just forget the rankings to then throw him in there against Gamrot, to have Gamrot just take him down and kill him in like 2 rounds.
Well, that's what I'm like. I'm just based on the rankings. Like, what was Fiziev was ranked 6 or 7, so Ruffy will probably be there, and Gamrot's right there at like 6 or 7. Like, I'm just going off of rankings in terms of big names. Like I said, like, I want to see him fight a guy like Paddy or Hooker or something, but it's just not going to happen. I just truly don't think it's going to happen.
It's going to be Benil Dariush, right, Rick?
Sure.
I mean, I guess that makes sense, but there is a point where he's going to have to sink or swim, and he's going to have to show improved grappling. Like, there's too many wrestlers at 55. There's too many guys who, like, even BSD, who's not primarily a grappler, uses it against strikers, and we see that, and he used it against Ruffy and completely neutralized them. He's going to have to sink or swim. Like, we talk about Paddy Pimblett. I don't know that would be a good fight for Ruffy. Like, if we've seen what Paddy Pimblett's chin can withstand, if he gets in on a double and he or pushes Ruffy against the cage and tries to take him down, I don't know that goes his way. So you have to match make carefully with him. I liked the Conor call out. He's obviously not going to get it, but Yeah, Dariush is fine. I just don't think that advances him anywhere. Doesn't push him any further than this win already does.
Yeah.
Dariush is a kind of like a veteran name. I think you keep him hot until you figure out what to do with him, right? Who knows who loses the BMF fight? Maybe you get him in
What
there.
about
I'm saying Gamrot's fucked, and then it's like I'm suggesting like Charles Oliveira. That's even more fucked as well. So I don't know.
What about a guy that's not ranked but is very popular that just came back, like a Jalen Turner, like a tall, lanky fighter that literally just had a spectacular performance?
I feel like Turner might beat him. I don't know.
But he's about to be ranked like number 6.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. And
really,
everyone
like,
above
ask
him. Yeah, everyone above him is just, it's hard to ask. Like I said, like the Hooker fight would be 6. It's not going to happen though.
Yeah. Looking at that, and you can't just rebook BSD either because we just saw that, and
that's
a bad idea for Ruffy.
Hell no.
Hey, by the way, speaking of BSD, Dan Hooker, obviously Dan is a close friend of mine. So every time I watch the fights, it's one of those things, you're there, you don't want to be biased, but you're also worried as you're watching cage side about what's going to happen. And when Dan Hooker came out in this fight, he did really well towards the start of it, right? Like he was able to land on BSD up against the cage. I think he hit him with a body shot. BSD looked like he didn't want to stand with Dan at all. He started trying to shoot for his legs, but then unfortunately, Dan, it just didn't feel like really had the right kind of game plan. We saw him try to judo trip BSD, and BSD landed on top of him. Of course, the attempted guillotines. That's probably something that should stop. It just wasn't a great game plan from Dan Hooker. And he's a fan favorite, but in the end, BSD was just able to strategically beat him. Rick, what's your reaction to what we saw from Dan? It was another fight where it felt like he could have done much better had he kind of followed the right game plan and kind of, came in a little bit more strategically.
I don't know if it was a game plan issue just from the perspective that this is what BSD does to strikers, right? We just talked about Hoofy and what he was able to do to him. It doesn't behoove him to stand and engage in the firefight that he was seemingly like kind of in the beginning of the fight doing with Hooker. Use the grappling and put him in bad positions. I think Hooker's choke attempts are probably like decent for creating the scrambles, right? We've seen him get out of bad positions with Arman Tsarukyan. We've seen him get out of positions with BSD. It's not a solution, right? It's not going to solve, his inability to kind of like get up once he's down there. But it creates scrambles at least. It's okay. Like Dan Hooker's in that Diaz brother realm right now, where it's in that Nate Diaz, like, he's going to come to bang. Put him in a fun fight with somebody who's going to stand and strike with him, and you'll get good results, right? Like if he's fighting a Charles Oliveira or a Max Holloway, I think it could be pretty fun. But you have to be careful on how you're matching him. I also don't know how many times Dan Hooker is going to get back in there, right? Like he's fought a lot in his UFC career.
How many times, dude? That guy's never going to stop. He's never stopping.
They may have to stop him though.
Yeah.
He's on. Yeah, it's an interesting one because obviously they need stars. They can use his name. But Jose, do they still do the Paddy Pimblett fight after what we saw against BSD?
I mean, I said win or lose, Hooker should probably fight Paddy because I think we all agree. Like Dan is also very. I would assume because Dan's obviously one of the longer tenured lightweights, especially from that part of the world, that he is not a cheap lightweight when he fights. He's probably, cheap is relative to like every MMA fighter is underpaid, but in turn, like relative to what the UFC hands out, he's probably an expensive lightweight, and they're going to want to, squeeze all of they can get out of him. So if you give him Paddy, which we would probably, based on what we've seen from Hooker's last 2 fights, the three of us would probably favor Paddy in that fight. And Hooker is a popular enough name that Paddy beating him bounces him right back with an impressive performance, and based on how expensive Hooker is, it just might be the best option. So win or lose, I thought that fight should have happened for Hooker anyway.
I think that it's still a big fight. It seems like Dan would be motivated against Paddy, so we will see a good version of Dan. And again, like I think there's a difference between the Dan Hooker that we saw against Gamrot that came out there with the perfect game plan and was able to pull that one out, versus the version of the Dan that we saw against BSD. But no doubt about it, him being in training camp and having fights coming up has probably the best thing for him. I know it's
Yeah.
good to have him in the training room and keeping him sharp. What do you do with BSD next, Rick? This is an interesting one, right? We were just talking about Ruffy. What the hell do we do with BSD? He was at the post-fight press conference saying he wants a BMF title, talking about all the big names in the division. But the UFC's in a funny place unless they're fighting in Europe or something like that. It looks like BSD's kind of run out of opponents for the moment.
I think you could conceivably put him in there against one of the Charles or Max. I think that's fine. I don't mind that. I think that's conceivable. I don't think that's a step down for either of them nor for BSD. He's definitely not getting the undisputed title shot. He probably isn't getting the interim title shot. So I would go lean into what he was talking about with either Max or Charles. I think that's a perfect option.
Do you do a bit of Gamrot here?
Yeah. I mean, I want to see BSD fight Max or Charles because that's a sick fight. But they're just I think the winner of Charles and Max is going to sit out for a lightweight, an undisputed championship, unless they just drop a big chunk of change on them. But with Justin probably fighting Ilya, and then Arman kind of floating around there, it might be a long wait. There is some history with Benoit and Gamrot because when Benoit was fought in Montreal, it was supposed to be against Joel Alvarez, and then Gamrot volunteered to step in, and then he got I think it was Kyle Prefalak or whatever is how to pronounce his name, stepped up instead. And there was some back and forth between Gamrot and BSD. And then after the win in Montreal, Benoit was like, I'll turn around and fight Gamrot right now. Like there was some issue there that I would not hate to see them sort it out, especially because Gamrot is such a good wrestler. BSD is a very violent grappler. He uses grappling to kind of break people apart. It would be a fun fight. It could be a very boring fight, but I can't imagine that. Or the Arman fight, if Arman just wants to stay active and prove he deserves the title. So any of the above.
If Justin and Ilya do fight, Arman and BSD makes sense to me. I agree. It sucks for Arman, but it makes sense. I hate it for Arman. Like this guy's been waiting. Like I think he has a better case than Lerone Murphy or Movsar even have.
I agree.
He had to fight and had to pull up to due to injury, and they acted like the guy lit the entire UFC on fire. So yeah, I'm down for Arman versus BSD, even though it's not great for Arman.
I'll tell you though, yeah, it makes sense. And then for Arman, it's like he's earning that one back, doing what he has to. I know that Dana White doesn't want to give him a title shot, but then after I learned what happened with the headbutt and Dan Hooker and Dan's nose and the actual truth behind what happened in that situation that people didn't know about, it kind of blew my mind and made a lot of sense as to why the UFC is a little bit hesitant. It's insane that the fight even happened.
He also punched a fan at UFC 300.
But dude, who goes out, headbutts someone in the nose? And I like Arman, but who goes out, headbutts someone in the nose right before a fight, breaks their nose, right? Breaks their nose. There's no real commission because it's Qatar. So the whole thing is basically cooked. And then the guy has to fight. Like it's just insane stuff that the fight even happened. But anyway.
It is, but it is also combined with the fact that in the last 4 months, he's turned into a global celebrity.
Yeah.
Like it's not an overstatement to say that. Like he is entering mainstream conversations in a way that other fighters have not been able to. And so I know Dana White is in his feelings about it, but the reality is he's a big star for the UFC, and he would be somebody that they should push as opposed to punish. And so, they're going to be in a tough spot, but he continues to rise in status.
And
the other thing about him is
he has that wrestling match. He has that wrestling match coming up end of February against was it Georgios Puelos, whatever his name is, who's obviously a big star online too.
Yeah, and the thing is, he's probably the best, and he's young, so that doesn't hurt your division either, considering that you got some issues all throughout it. By the way, just quickly, shout out to Dave Sandine, who just bought 10 memberships for all the boys in the chat. We appreciate you, man. Thanks so much for supporting the show. It's just me doing it at the moment. No sponsors. Every dollar counts. All right, just quickly, what about Tai Tuivasa? Tai Tuivasa. Man, I'll tell you, this was supposed to be the big return. I like Tai. I've been there through his whole career. I know all about his, what he's had to overcome. Obviously, he had knee injuries before he even came to the UFC. He has always been a gifted athlete. Here in Australia, he probably could have played professional football, before he actually got in the UFC. But he takes his break, right? We see he wanted to take his time, come back, get back in the gym, change some stuff up. So we're sitting there waiting for a version of Tai Tuivasa, like the old version, like the version we saw maybe against Derrick Lewis or Cyril Gane and some of the landmark wins that he had. Goes out there against Teixeira, and man, it looks like he looks a little bit slower. He looks a little bit more tired. He has less weapons than before. He has devastating leg kicks before. And it was just a rough return for someone who's now in a 6-fight losing streak. Jose, you know just how big Tai Tuivasa is because you've been here for the big Australian cards. How disappointed were you when you saw what Tai sort of brought us in this fight? I mean, no doubt about it, Teixeira came out and was able to win the fight. Man, Tai Tuivasa just did not look anywhere near what he looked like towards his prime when he was.
Yeah, I was surprised because historically Tai does pretty well against people that are like significantly taller than him and that are predominantly strikers. I know he lost to Volkov, but Volkov just is operating at another level right now. And he seems to struggle with like the short, stockier guys. I don't know what his game plan was, but even the broadcast where like he would have any semblance of success. He would clinch up against the fence. And if I'm not mistaken, Taliesin Sherry is like a high-level black belt or jiu-jitsu belt anyway. I don't know if he's a black belt exactly, but I'm like, this is just bad game planning. Like, again, like we talked about earlier, like being able to adjust on the fly. Tai just seems so exhausted he couldn't. Obviously, we saw the images of Tai when he was the guest fighter not long ago when he was, like 300-something plus pounds. I would imagine that weight cut was not pleasant getting back down there, especially with, like you said, all his past knee injuries. I don't want to say disappointed because Taliesin Sherry is a very good fighter at heavyweight. Take that for what it is. Just felt like an entirely different fighter in Tai Tuivasa than we've seen in the past. Because like knocking out Derrick Lewis, tough thing to do. He's knocked out Greg Hardy. He's beaten Stefan Struve, and he's looked very talented at times. This just did not look like the Tai that we had seen in the past.
Rick, I think it's hard because, by the way, now New York Rick is in the car. I love it. Where is he going next? Who knows? Maybe the strip club. We'll see. But it's so hard to watch.
You never know my next move. You never know my next move.
I love it. Where's New York Rick? There's a little book where you can find him all over New York.
Yeah.
You never know where you're going to. It's sad because the division is in a terrible state. Tai Tuivasa was a big name here. He has all the opportunity in the world to basically go out here and win this fight and get right back in the mix, right? And he comes back and he looks like that. Like, what was your reaction when you were doing the live stream and you saw that version of Tai Tuivasa being the version that returned?
I was encouraged in the third round, right? Like, obviously, I was like, okay, look, he's gassed, but so is Taliesin Teixeira. Can he give it one last effort? And he tried, but man, by the time he was, clinching and seemed like he completely ran out of gas, it did get a little bit sad, but Kai's like Derrick Lewis to me. Like, I don't expect him to be a championship level fighter. I expect him to just come in there and throw hands with people. And if you match him appropriately, he can always do that. And there's lots of heavyweights that he can still knock out. He's on a bad run, but he's on a bad run against, really good heavyweights. Like, that's just, what now, sorry, to Jose's point, that's relative, right? Really good heavyweights are only, applicable in the heavyweight division. They're not really good for the standard level I'd expect in the UFC, but he's beating top level UFC heavyweight. He's competing against top level UFC heavyweights, and he's just coming up short. But there's lots of guys, he can continue to get in there with and try to throw hands with. But like Derrick Lewis, you have to be careful about who. You have to be careful about who you're going to match him up with. A guy like Taliesin Teixeira, who's a black belt, and once it hit the ground was very, very skilled at keeping Tai there and, maneuvering towards submissions. That's not the matchup that you're gonna want to see Tai in.
Yeah, but then you also want to see him come out and be like, all right, don't just run into a takedown. Don't just do the things that he does and he's been doing for these last few fights. It's not as much that as the fact that, dude, like, are you taking this seriously? Are you training, or are you just cutting the weight and coming out there? You know what I mean? Because that's what it's kind of looked like for the last few fights with Tai.
Yeah, and Tai Tuivasa, I think, signed to the UFC in 2017. Talon Teixeira made his pro debut in 2021. So it's like, it seems like now there's a whole new generation of heavyweights. So like Ty lost to the previous one and now he's losing to the new one. So tough scene.
And he could, but he could have beaten Teixeira. The
For
path
sure.
was there. But yeah.
He clipped Cyril Gahn. Like that's heavyweight MMA. Like you could be terrible and land one giant punch.
The sliding doors on Tai Tuivasa beating Cyril Gahn is one of the craziest that I can think of, because I thought he was about to knock out Cyril Gahn and be fighting John Jones for the belt.
Yeah.
And fast forward, he hasn't won since, I think, and is
his last win is Derrick Lewis.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last time he won, it was Derrick Lewis, UFC 271, February 12th, 2022. And now this is his sixth fight in a row that he's lost. The UFC won't cut him. I'm sure he'll stick around for a few more fights, but I'd just love to see the next version of Tai Tuivasa, maybe a little bit, taking this a little bit more seriously, but we'll see what happens. Hey, what about this, guys? Last one from the card that I want to talk about. Quillan going out there. Did you guys watch his fight with Jamie Mullarkey? The way he was able to put on another statement performance. Now, those that don't realize that Quillan is from Perth. He's 26 years old. He's on an incredible run right now. It just looks so incredible because he was able to show us how good of a grappler he was, right? Because we all think, Quillan, knockout artist, but this guy is super well-rounded for 26 years old. Jose, this guy looks like a potential star in the division.
He does, and he comes off as I think a potential, I don't want to say star, but a guy that people are definitely going to be intrigued by. He called for a top 15. Probably not going to happen just based on the depth of lightweight, because like Faraz Yam is, I think, ranked 15 right now and Ruffy's 14. This is obviously before the new rankings come out. So he'll probably have a couple more wins to go, but yeah, he is a fun interview and a fun fighter. And this also isn't the first time we see him grapple. I know, remember when he fought in Newark, he was a pretty grappling heavy couple of rounds in there, obviously not to this level. But it seems like every time he goes out there, like knocks out a guy with his boxing, has a very wrestling heavy approach in Newark, knocks out a guy with a head kick, and then goes out there and submits a veteran like Jamie Mullarkey. Seems like every time he goes out, he shows a new wrinkle to his game. Very fun interview too. Chatted with him before his debut in Sydney, chatted with him in Abu Dhabi. Him and his whole team are just very interesting people. What you see on the screen is exactly who he is. His Instagram discover page is an absolute delight. It's literally just all recipes for cheese, because when he cuts weight, he just looks at cheese all day. So interesting dude. I hope he goes far because he clearly has a lot of fans coming. And apparently, according to his manager, like women love him. Like his DMs are just flooded with women. So if you get that female audience to tune into an MMA fight, you must be doing something.
New York Rick isn't so sure about it, but what I can tell you is he's got a great demographic behind him, right? Perth, Australia, one of the last pay-per-view markets, and it looks like he's got everything that you need to be a star down here. New York Rick, do you just go for it with him, and do you throw him in that spot against Moicano, or do you think that's a little bit too soon, too quick, and a little bit of a risk for someone like Quillan?
Before I answer that, I think you've misread my facial reactions. I don't doubt it at all. Quillan Salkild is a tall, athletic, sexy man with a great mustache. I have a feeling that the DMs get quite crazy. As far as should he fight Moicano, no, I don't think that's too much too soon. I think Moicano's on the downside of his career, and I think Quillan would be a big favorite over him. I think this would be like the Henry Cejudo to Peyton Talbot type fight, where he's getting a real name on his resume, who's on the back nine and maybe has a little bit left. But I think he could do very well against Renato Moicano. He's just turned 26. He's well-rounded. He's incredible. He's incredible in the grappling. He obviously has stopping power, as we saw against Nasrat Haqparast. So yeah, I don't think that's too soon at all. I think Moicano is a perfect type of benchmark. The problem is once you pass Moicano in this division, you're entering, that may be too much too soon. Once you get a win over Moicano, you're starting to enter names where it is like it's sink or swim time. And at 26 years old, I don't know if he's fully developed enough to do that. But I'm interested to see and find out. And unlike in boxing, like in MMA, if he takes an L or two here, I don't think it's over, right? It's one of those opportunities where he can build himself back. So yeah, fuck it, why not? Let's just push him.
It's also interesting because Carlos Prates accidentally said there's going to be that May Perth Fight Night card. Do you load the deck, throw him in a co-main event there with someone good? But I'll get our last few questions before I let you guys go because I got to hit the airport. Before I do, while I find the questions, Jose, what do you think happens with Moicano now that he doesn't have an opponent if it's not Quillan?
I mean, they'll probably. I have no idea, man. Because the Ribovic fight that everyone keeps seeing, that's a sick fight, but it doesn't seem like Moicano wants it. And like Rick said, he's clearly on the back nine of his career. He only wants fights that make sense. So I have no idea. I thought Quillan should just step up to fight Michael Johnson. Michael Johnson doesn't have a fight. He lost the fight against Alex Hernandez. He's unranked. He's on a 3-fight win streak. It seems like if you beat Michael Johnson, who Jamie Mullarkey has a win over Michael Johnson, which is just also very bizarre. I thought that fight made sense. Get through Michael Johnson. You can, get in that top 20 range, top 17 range. Moicano is sick, but if the Moicano that shows up against Benoit shows up against Quillan, that's going to be a tough night for Quillan. No wrong answers. Lightweight rules, but I like the Michael Johnson fight. I don't know what's going to happen with Moicano, though. That's a tough question.
While we're talking about that card, New York Rick, give me your thoughts. Obviously, everything is still developing right here, but what's your guess on the co-main event for the Max Charles card? At the moment, it's TBD versus TBD. Who do you think TBD versus TBD could be or should be?
I couldn't even tell you. Because at this point, I have no fucking idea what's even going on in terms of the forward-looking calendar. I don't know who's competing on this White House card. I don't know how many big fights are going to be on it. I don't know how many small fights are going to be on it.
It's fucking everything up because we're waiting to find out what happens, and then nothing's being announced.
It's like UFC 300 all over again.
Yeah. It's ruining the mojo. It's ruining the flow. It's not making it clear like how the rest of the year is going to play out. So I got nothing. I couldn't tell you. Because that I might say a fight, and then that fight's going to end up on the prelims of, White House. I got nothing.
Jose, question from Cosmo. What did you think of the pacing and the lack of commercial breaks during the walkouts and in between rounds?
Didn't hate it. Like I said at the beginning, I didn't really get to watch the first Paramount event because I was backstage interviewing people. I think I only watched the main event. So all the complaints about the ads and losing the walkouts, I didn't witness that. But I didn't hate the pacing. I love the earlier start time, especially for us people on the East Coast. Like ending an event at like midnight or 1 is a godsend to me. Didn't hate it. Also, March 7th, the co-main event, I bet is Josh Van versus Manel Kopp / Tetsuya Taira. Double title fight. Because Van wants to get back in there. There's a whole lot of chatter online about a quote unquote sign the contract situation. Taira is saying, don't fight Kopp, fight me instead, March 7th. I have a feeling it's probably going to be the flyweight fight.
Do you think Kopp's going to get passed over here? I feel like that's the bigger fight.
I want to see both. Like, I truly don't think there's, like, in terms of heat, it's Manel. Manel's put in the work, former Ryzen champ. People also don't realize that Josh Van was supposed to fight Taira, like, in his second UFC fight. And then I can't remember who fell out. So we could have got to see like 21-year-old Josh Van versus like 23-year-old Tetsuya Taira way early in their careers, which would have been like the Dustin Poirier, Max Holloway of the flyweight division. So no wrong answer. Because Kyoji has a fight against Amir Albazi, I think I'm remembering that correctly. So no wrong answer, but it should be Kopp. He's done the work. Taira's always going to be there. He's young enough.
That's this weekend, I think, right? So we'll see what happens there. Yeah. New York Rick, super chat here from It's All Gucci. BSD hasn't earned enough street credit to fight for a BMF title. If he fights the winner of Max versus Charles, the belt can't be on the line. What do you say, Rick? I mean, the guy was crazy.
What the guy, fuck are you talking about?
He's a real life Rambo. So I think he said that while Dan was fighting, he was actually overseas, like taking care of business. So he might be the most BMF of the BMFs in that regard, right?
Yeah, I'm calling cap on that one. Like, BSD is a bad boy, and he can definitely fight for a BMF title.
For sure.
Yeah. And by the way, thank you for the super chat, though. That's really cool, and I
Thank you.
appreciate all the support. All right, I'm going to wrap it up. Before I do, what about this? A guy that we know very well, Lazy Bear, just put into the chat. It's his birthday. So happy birthday, Lazy Bear. I see you support the Aerial Show. I see you support MMA fighting all the time. You support me. You got the Just Bleed Radio. Congratulations. Dude. Have a special
Literally,
birthday.
he is the, like, who was it? Like when Bilal Muhammad was the guest fighter at like 7 different pay-per-views. Lazy Bet is the guest fighter Bilal Muhammad of the YouTube comments.
Lazy,
Thank you so
back
much.
to one of your other paid comments. It's a Mavis discount, not a Jiffy Lube. But yes, it's still a historic day. It's still the debut on Submission Radio for Mavis discount tires.
Yes. Let's get some money on the show from it. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to the airport. There they are there. Jose Youngs, New York Rick. We got obviously Uncrowned, the boys in the back, MMA fighting, another big week there. I am Dennis Gradov. I'll let you guys go. So
Prop
guys
quiz champ. Let's not forget.
Prop quiz champ. There you go. I'll catch you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching Submission Radio Morning After Live.